Chapter 27. At 8:40, Molly and Rocky were outside Shoring's bank. It was a huge, austere fortress with walls steep and solid like the side of a cliff. On two balconies were window boxes full of holly and red berries. Hidden in the holly were cameras that filmed the bank's entrance. It didn't open until 9 o'clock. Molly and Rocky sat on a bench on the other side of the street, hidden from sight by a bush. Hiding Nachman's plans behind comics, they were testing themselves on the layout of the bank, trying to visualize where everything was and where all the people who worked there would be. Through the bushes, they watched New Yorkers hurrying to work. Molly and Rocky threw pebbles into the gutter as the last few minutes ticked by. I just hope they're all easy to hypnotize, said Molly. And you can do it, can't you, Rocky? I mean, I'm not being rude. It's just that you said that that most of the time it works for you. I mean, how often doesn't it work? The thing is, if they get alerted to the fact that we're trying to hypnotize them, then we're in big trouble. I hypnotized you, didn't I? Said Rocky. That's true, admitted Molly. But are you sure you can still do it when you're nervous? Yep, well, I think so. Are you feeling nervous now? Yep, same here. Keep calm, Molly. Rocky said, you're just getting the last minute jitters. We can do this. As long as you remember everything we worked out last night. Okay, said Molly, trying to relax. A clock on the side of the bank chimed 9, making them both jump. The heavy cast iron gates of the bank opened. Do you reckon that all the people who work there are in now? She asked nervously. Rocky shrugged. I suppose so. He stuffed the bank plans into Molly's knapsack alongside the hypnotism book, which was all wrapped up for Nachman. The two friends walked slowly to the bank. The closer they got, the bigger the bank got, and the more their stomachs churned. I've got butterflies, said Rocky. You're lucky, said Molly, wiping her hands on her jeans. I've got jellyfish. Gingerly, they stepped up to the stone steps. As they walked through the immense entrance, Molly noticed the huge metal bolts that kept the doors locked at night, and the two gorilla-like security guards who seemed to look straight through her. Inside the bank, it was cool and quiet. Copper fans and green lamps excuse me, hung down from the high ceiling, and the floor was polished black marble. Molly glanced up at the high, barred windows and saw cameras like menacing black flies crouched on the walls. Dotted about were smart-looking leather-topped desks with weighing scales on them, where bank clerks sat. Here and there were tables where customers could lay out rubies and gems on white cloths for bankers to inspect through magnifying lenses. Along the back wall were glass-fronted booths, shielding more bank workers from the public, and strung out across the room were heavy red ropes held up by brass posts. A few customers were already lining up. Telephones were ringing and being answered. The place was buzzing with activity. Oh dear, whispered Molly. Look at the cameras. This is going to be tricky. Not if you stick to our plan, said Rocky encouragingly. You'll see, we'll be fine. And good luck, Molly. Molly swallowed hard and nodded. Likewise, she said. Rocky went to sit on a chair by the wall. Molly walked toward a desk in the corner of the hall. She sat down opposite a young, freckle-faced clerk. Good morning, she said. I'd like to deposit some rubies. Certainly, madam, said the clerk, looking up. The poor young man was an easy target. He fell into Molly's web like a blind caterpillar. Soon Molly had given her instructions. From now on, you will do exactly as I say, or as my friend says. Until 10 o'clock, you will behave normally to other customers. Then, at 10, you will come to the front of the bank and await for further instructions. The clerk nodded. And when would you like to bring these jewels in? He asked, behaving normally. That's very good, said Molly. Now please take me to see the bank manager. The clerk led Molly through a security door, acting as innocently as possible. She looked straight ahead and followed the freckly man along a grand corridor until they came to a door with a golden plaque on it that read, Mrs. V. Briscoe, manager. The clerk knocked and they entered. This startled the manager's secretary, who stopped her typing and looked very irritated by the unannounced visitors. But after a few seconds of Molly's glare, she too was captive. She spoke to Mrs. Briscoe through an intercom. Sorry to bother you, Mrs. Briscoe. There's someone here to see you called Mr. Molly's eyes darted desperately about the room for inspiration. Miss Cactus, she said, seeing a spiky potted plant on the windowsill. She winced inside as she heard the stupid name coming out of her mouth. Miss Cactus, repeated the secretary. I think you ought to see her. Send her in, came the manager's reply. The bank manager was a small, thin woman of 50 or so. She greeted Molly with an impatient frown, examining her through horn-rimmed glasses and wondering what on earth a child could want with her. I'm afraid we don't give tours of Shorings to school children, but you may pick up some Shorings Bank literature from our information desk for your school project. I'm sure that will be adequate for your needs. Goodbye. No, said Molly. I would like your personal assistance on my project, please. As a bank manager, Mrs. Briscoe had learned to be very untrusting of people, so she was tricky to hypnotize. Molly found her surprisingly resistant. She was like a dog pulling on a leash, refusing to come, but Mrs. Briscoe's coming was inevitable. Since she was on Molly's leash, Molly twitched and twisted, and she tried to defend herself, but she couldn't resist Molly's tugging eyes. In a half a minute, Molly had her well and truly hooked. Soon Mrs. Briscoe had agreed to do everything Molly asked. With no time to lose, she had all the bank workers and security guards brought one by one into her office where Molly worked her magic on them. Molly gave each one the same instructions to keep working as normal between 10 o'clock, then to assemble in the lobby of the bank and wait for more orders. Meanwhile, Rocky was at the front of the bank, keeping an eye on any new arrivals. He saw customers come and go, and he watched as the clerks behind the glass partition left their desks and came back again with a glazed look in their eyes. Now Molly turned her attention to the cameras that were spying from every corner. Some she knew from Nachman's plans were hidden on the sides of waste paper baskets. Already, Rocky and Molly would have been recorded by them. It was very important to wipe this evidence clean away, and then work could begin. Miss Briscoe took her to the video suite, and every camera was switched off. Now, said Molly, breathing a sigh of relief, I want you to rewind the tapes and erase all of this morning's film. Impossible, said the manager. It goes electronically straight to our records office. What? Exclaimed Molly, incredulously. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Rocky and her on tape at the records office. This was terrible. Molly would be recognized. Even the stupidest of detectives would be suspicious, seeing her walking around the back rooms of the bank. Nachman's notes hadn't said anything about a records office. Molly was filled with fury and thrown into panic at the same time. Wait here, she commanded, and she hurried out to Rocky. Rocky, she growled, we've got a problem. We're on tape and it can't be erased because the film is automatically transmitted to the records office. We can't go ahead. We'll be caught straight away. But Rocky, if we don't, what'll happen to Petula? Rocky looked worried. Take me to the video room. He said, I'm not promising anything, but I may just be able to sort this out. After extracting the telephone number of the records office manager from Mrs. Briscoe, Rocky settled down with the telephone and tried to focus. He'd hypnotized over the phone only a few times before, and it was very difficult to relax with Molly sighing and biting her lip beside him. Concentrating as if his life depended on it, he dialed the number. An operator answered the phone, and since the person was very unsuspecting, it was much easier than Rocky expected to hypnotize him long distance. Soon the operator had erased all of that morning's tape. Feeling much more confident, Rocky then telephoned the bank's security company and had the guard there switch off the Shorings bank alarm. Phew, Molly murmured. That was brilliant, Rocky. Lucky it worked, said Rocky, breathing more easily now. It just shows, though, he pointed out, that Nachman's plans aren't perfect. I hope there aren't any more nasty surprises waiting for us. Molly nodded, feeling sick. Then on they went. Both the front door security guards were summoned to Mrs. Briscoe's office. As they stood beside each other in their hypnotic states, with their tongues dangling from their mouths, Molly thought how like Stone Age they looked. Which one do we choose as our driver? She asked. Which is the more intelligent-looking one? I wouldn't say either has a brain bigger than Sugar Lump, said Rocky, but I think the one on the left looks the cleverest. How can you tell? Because he's not trying to eat his collar. The security guard they chose was most muscly and also the hairiest. Rocky took the hungry one back to the lobby of the bank, and Molly was led by the other guard to the bank garage. This was at the back of the building, down a narrow passage, at the end of which was a black fire door with a metal handle. Behind this door was a steel balcony and a flight of steps that led down to the concrete floor of a garage the size of a tennis court. There stood their truck, a gray truck the size of a small elephant. Molly imagined that she would be just able to stand up in the back of it. Molly left the guard there and went back to the lobby where she hypnotized the 13 customers who were there. Soon they stood in a line like toy soldiers standing at attention. And as the clock struck 10, the doors of the bank were closed. A notice was put up outside, closed until 2:30 due to staff training. We apologize for any inconvenience. Some very annoyed customers who wanted to come in were left on the steps complaining. Then hypnotized bank workers started to fill the lobby, and soon they too all stood in line like zombies. This is like a dream, Rocky whispered. For a moment he and Molly stood still. It was eerie to be standing there with the working day on hold. In the background, a ringing phone made Molly jump, but it was quickly answered by a receptionist who, as instructed, said, I'm afraid he isn't available at the moment. We'll call you back. Goodbye. Okay, said Rocky. Let's hit the basement. Mrs. Briscoe led them down a gray passage to an elevator. There she tapped a 10-digit code number into a small silver box. The doors opened with a swish, and Molly and Rocky followed her into the elevator. As it moved down its shaft, Molly started to feel claustrophobic. They'd hypnotized roughly 35 people who would all be on the phone to the police immediately if they came out of their trances, and these people were all upstairs while Rocky and she were about to conduct their business below. If anyone were to wake up, she and Rocky would be trapped. Molly banished the thought from her mind and tried to concentrate on the matter at hand. Her knees were feeling all prickly, and she kept shivering from nerves, and on top of this, her fear kept making her want to go to the bathroom, even though she didn't really want to go at all. Rocky's face, she noticed, was looking distinctly pale. Molly was reminded of all of the times he had helped her out of trouble at the Hardwick house. She felt guilty now for getting him involved. I'm sorry about this, she whispered as the elevator doors opened. Forget it, he said with a nervous smile. Now they were standing in the basement. Ahead of her, Molly recognized from Nachman's plans the entrances to the private counting rooms. As Mrs. Briscoe led them down the tight, low-ceilinged passage to the storage rooms where the jewel vaults were, Molly lagged behind. She wanted to check that no guards were inside the counting rooms, unhypnotized, so peeling away from Rocky and Mrs. Briscoe, she went inside. It was extremely lucky that she did. A stony-faced man wearing a heavy striped suit looked up. He had a safety deposit box tray on the table in front of him and was pawing over a very large diamond. What the heck is this kid doing down here? He demanded, his eyes narrowing and his face wrinkling into a scowl. Quickly, Molly zapped him, and she removed the diamond from his grip. The diamond was heavy and hard and enormous. It caught Molly's reflection as she rolled it around in her hand. Jeepers, this must be worth a fortune, she marveled. You betcha, the man growled. Stole it today. Where from? Molly asked, shocked and fascinated. From another crook. Molly shuddered, put the diamond in her jacket pocket, and caught up with Rocky. He looked as if he'd just been told that Petula had been made into my mincemeat. What's the matter? The locks, whispered Rocky hoarsely. That idiot Nachman doesn't know a thing about this place. It's all been updated since he was here. There's absolutely no way we are ever going to get into these strong rooms and get these safety deposit boxes open. Why not? Because Mrs. Briscoe here has told me that she can't open them by herself. Both she and the customers who rent them have to be present to open their boxes. There are 5 strong rooms, each with 80 deposit boxes. That's 400 boxes and 400 customers who need to be here. But why? Asked Molly. Because, explained Mrs. Briscoe, we have a new device that opens the boxes only once it has information from me and from an authorized customer. What kind of information? Iris read information. Molly's legs felt all wobbly, and suddenly, what was Miss Briscoe talking about? Show me the device, she said. Mrs. Briscoe led her to a black box on the wall. On it was a panel with buttons labeled from 0 to 9, an electronic display board where numbers came up in green. At the moment this display read 0, 0, 0. To the right of the zeros was a yellow light the size of a billiard ball. Explain how it works, said Molly. First, I punch in the number of the safety deposit box that needs to be opened. Then the device matches my iris with my iris pattern in its memory. Next, it reads the customer's iris and matches that with the one on its memory. If all of the information on the irises is correct, the computer in the machine knows that I am present and so is the customer. The device can then authorize the deposit box to open. It is so that the safety deposit box cannot be opened by anyone who wished to steal their contents. Molly's lips curled. This was completely unforeseen. She looked at Rocky, who was looking as if he might be sick. And what exactly is an iris? A fingerprint of some kind? In a way it is, like a fingerprint, in that no 2 human irises are the same. That is why the device works. Yes, I know why it works, said Molly. I just want to know what an iris is. Mrs. Briscoe Mrs. Briscoe's answers were flat, as if she were reading from a boring textbook. The iris is the colored part of the eye, the part that gives a person his or her eye color. The iris has the muscles that contract and dilate the black pupil in the center of the eye. Everyone has a different looking iris. Yours is lovely. It is a beautiful shade of green. A glimmer of hope shot through Molly. She nodded at Rocky. It's worth trying. A minute later, Rocky had punched the number 1 into the iris reading device to open safety deposit box number 1, and Mrs. Briscoe was bending over, peering into the machine, having her iris read. Then it was Molly's turn. She leaned forward and glued her eye up to the yellow hole. She looked inside into the iris reading equipment, and the machine in turn looked into Molly's eye. There was Molly's eye, a great speckled green jewel flecked with emerald rays. The machine began to read the branches of tiny veins and muscles, making a pattern in its computer memory. It made piping noises as it assimilated the information. Then, all of a sudden, the eye in front of it changed. The machine began again, pipping away as it read the iris. When the eye changed once more, quicker than before, the machine started yet again. The eye shifted, the machine shifted. When the pupil in the eye grew larger, the machine adapted to the growth. The pupil shrank, the machine shrank its data. The jewel-like iris started to turn. The machine was confused. It hadn't been programmed to read turning eyes, and now the green flecks in the eye were flickering. The machine's temperature went up as it searched its silicon memory from its instructions on what to do. The eye began to pulse. The computer pipped faster. The eye started to twist and pulse at the same time. The computer started to panic. Its temperature was soaring. Its chip was bending. Its reading device was. All of a sudden, the computer couldn't remember what or where the reading device was. Suddenly, all it could compute was how perfect the eye in front of it looked. Its silicon chip felt as warm and comfortable as the day it had been made. The computer liked this eye, liked its iris. It was better than all of the other irises it had ever read put together. The computer relaxed and gave instructions to itself to open up completely. Ping clunch, ping clunch, ping clunch, ping clunch, ping clunch, blink, 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 blink. 400 safety deposit boxes. Doors opened at once, and simultaneously 5 steel-barred gates on the deposit rooms unlocked themselves. Molly took her eye away from the machine and admired her work. Now that's what I call style, she said. Rocky accompanied Mrs. Briscoe back to the lobby of the bank. There he ordered the 35 hypnotized people to go to the basement and make a human chain from the safety deposit boxes all the way to the bank truck in the garage. Mrs. Briscoe provided Molly and Rocky with the basketball-sized burlap sacks and lots of big brown envelopes. Immediately, the two of them set to work. The strong rooms were stuffed with a daunting amount of treasure. Each of the rooms had 8 columns of 10 boxes. Each box had a small metal tray in it that could be pulled out, and every one of them, Molly and Rocky soon discovered, was different. There were trays with large single rubies carefully laid out on velvet. There were others with tiny fingernail-sized packets stuffed into them like sardines. There were trays full of pearl necklaces and others covered with diamond rings. Some held leather, silk, or suede pouches. Each pouch was filled with gems. There were trays of expensive antique jewelry and especially cut jewels. Molly and Rocky emptied each tray, putting its contents into a separate brown envelope, doing 1 column of boxes at a time. 10 full brown envelopes filled every basketball-sized sack. Finally, the last of the sacks was passed onto the human conveyor belt and transported to the garage. There, they were loaded by the gorilla. It was exhausting work. Millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of jewels left the vaults. But eventually every last one had been lifted and packed, and a pile of plump bags sat expectantly at the back of the truck. It was 1 o'clock. Molly and Rocky assembled the sweaty, hypnotized subjects back to the lobby and dully blanked all their minds. All of you will wake up when you hear the clock outside strike 2:30, Molly said. You will all tell the police that an armed gang of robbers with stockings on their heads robbed the bank, and well, each of you will have your own story to tell, like how frightened you were that you were said that what they said to you, that sort of thing. And until 2:30 you can all sit on the floor and sing songs. The last thing is, you will have no memories at all of my friend here and me. The people in the lobby obediently all sat down and began to sing songs. Molly thought how sweet they looked, like kindergarten children. Then she and Rocky jumped into the front of the security truck with the hypnotized driver. The garage door opened and the truck left, and the door shut behind them. It was a nerve-wracking drive from Shoring's Bank to West 52nd Street because the gorilla was not in complete control of the truck. But soon, near the docks, they located the run-down building that was Nachman's warehouse. Molly tried to read its graffitied exterior while Rocky hopped out to open its shabby doors. Then the transplanting began. The loot bags had to be repacked into Nachman's brown truck. When the job was done, the guard sat down, red in the face from all the effort, and Molly gave him a drink. Thank you very, very much, said Rocky, feeling sorry for him. Now you must drive the empty truck back to the bank, but you won't wake up or get there until 3 o'clock. You won't remember this address. You will tell everyone who asks that you were made to unload the stolen stuff into all sorts of different cars, Mustangs, Cadillacs, and station wagons. And you'll say that afterward you were tied up and blindfolded, that when you finally broke loose, you found yourself on 99th Street, and you drove back to the bank from there. The gorilla grunted, and then slurped his water, spilling half of it down his chest as he drank. Soon he was gone. Molly sat nervously on a chair, waiting for Nachman to arrive. End of chapter 27.